Hey guys, tonight we're heading into the cold, clangy, overglorified world of medieval knighthood. You've probably imagined it before. Gleaming armor, gallant duels, poetic speeches, and dashing heroics. But tonight, you get to be the knight. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive breakfast. The year is 1374. You're 23, sleep-deprived, and currently being poked in the ribs by a teenage squire named Osric, who smells like boiled cabbage and ambition. You're lying on a lumpy straw mattress inside a drafty stone keep, your wool blanket crusted with last night's sweat and a faint trace of stew. It's not even light outside yet, and a trumpet just blared from the tower, echoing like the world's most obnoxious rooster. Welcome to your daily 4:30 a.m. wake-up call. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You groan and try to roll over, but your shoulder smacks into a wooden beam. Ah yes, your quarters, half of a servant's room with an upgrade in the form of one moth-chewed tapestry featuring a faded unicorn. Fancy. Osric clears his throat and cheerfully announces, "It's arms inspection today, sir." You reply with a low noise that could mean anything from "thank you" to "please bury me alive." As a knight, you're expected to be an early riser, full of discipline, honor, and spiritual reflection. In reality, you're mostly full of bruises and whatever's still fermenting in your stomach from yesterday's fish stew. You swing your legs over the edge of the mattress and instantly regret it. The stones beneath your bare feet are so cold they feel personal. You grope around for your linen undershirt, only to discover it's still damp from yesterday's training. You sniff it. Yup, smells like mildew and regret. Perfect. While you dress, Osric chats incessantly about heraldry, sword polish, and something about a tournament happening 2 castles over. You mostly nod. Your mind is occupied by 2 things: the crushing weight of responsibility and the persistent tickle of straw in your underclothes. Downstairs, the castle is stirring. Squires run back and forth like manic pigeons, carrying boots, belts, and buckets of questionable origin. A few kitchen boys dart through with trays of porridge, and one of them nearly takes you out at the knees. "Mind your sword, sir," he squeaks. You don't have your sword yet? Ah, right. Osric is still polishing it. With your best linen. Breakfast is served in the great hall. Served is a generous term. You find a place on a wooden bench that's colder than your ex-girlfriend's goodbye, and Osric places a wooden bowl in front of you. Inside, thin porridge, a crust of dark rye, and a boiled egg that might be older than your squire. You eat quickly. No one lingers at the table unless they want to be volunteered for ditch repair. The bread is hard, the porridge is bland, and the egg, well, the egg stares at you funny. You feed it to a passing dog and pretend not to notice it limping afterward. By now, the trumpet has sounded again. Time for morning drills. You shuffle outside, boots stiff, cloak flapping. The courtyard is covered in frost, your breath hanging in the air like dragon smoke. You line up with other knights in training and try to look impressive. You fail. Your sword belt is crooked, your chainmail is pinching something vital, and your left gauntlet has gone missing. Osric hands it to you. "Sorry, sir. I thought it was a soup ladle." Training begins with footwork. Lots of stomping, pivoting, and lunging. which is fine for the 20-year-olds. Less fine for you, who slipped on a turnip last week and haven't walked straight since. Then come sword drills. You and a partner, some guy named Randolph, who definitely does squats in his spare time, are told to lightly spar. Randolph hits like a wagon wheel rolling downhill. Within minutes, your shoulder is numb, your vision's blurry, and you're wondering if early retirement was a thing in the 1300s. Historians still argue whether night training was as brutal as the stories claim. Some say it was a mix of discipline and pageantry, less blood, more pageant. Others insist it was relentless, violent, and designed to weed out the weak like you'd weed a cabbage patch. Given your current bruised ribs, you're leaning toward the latter. You stagger through the rest of the session, accidentally drop your sword twice, and nearly decapitate a chicken that wandered into the ring. Randolph laughs and calls you butter hands. You consider challenging him to a duel, but honestly, you'd lose to a mildly irritated goose right now. By mid-morning, your muscles are screaming, your stomach is grumbling, and your armor is rusting from your own sweat. You hobble back to your room, if a space the size of a goat shed can be called a room, and collapse onto your straw bed, armor and all. You've survived your first few hours. Barely, but you already miss porridge, and your bed, and not being a knight. You wake up with a mouthful of straw, a bent elbow, and the distant, echoing voice of Osric muttering, "It's armor time, sir," as though this is the most exciting thing to happen all week. You groan, not just from pain, but from the memory of what's about to happen. Getting dressed, not in something reasonable, like a tunic, or a sturdy pair of pants, but in roughly 65 pounds of iron, leather, and your own steadily crumbling dignity. You sit up, bleary-eyed. Your joints pop like damp firewood. The fire in the hearth is dead, of course, and your armor, which Osric lovingly polished last night, is glinting in the corner like it's mocking you. You shuffle over and eye the pieces. There are so many. The breastplate, the greaves, the vambraces, the gorget, the cuisses, the sabatons. And that's not even including the padded gambeson you have to wear underneath, which smells like old cheese and failed ambitions. You point vaguely at the chest plate. "Start there." Osric claps his hands and sets to work. First comes the linen shirt and hose. Fine. Then the padded gambeson. It's like trying to climb into a woolen straitjacket. You twist, grunt, curse, quietly, and Osric helpfully tightens the laces until you wheeze. "Breathing optional," he chirps. Next, the mail hauberk. It weighs nearly 30 pounds on its own. You lift it over your head and promptly crumple like a sack of beets. Osric tugs it down over your shoulders, humming some annoying song about valor. Once it's on, your arms hang like overboiled noodles. Every step squeaks. You feel like a walking sack of pots. Then comes the plate armor. Piece by clanking piece, Osric straps, buckles, and ties you into your portable metal tomb. Breastplate, backplate, arm guards, shin guards, knee cops. He nearly forgets the codpiece. "Not today, Osric." But sir, regulations. Not today. Historians still argue just how long it took to get fully armored. Some say experienced knights could be suited up in under 10 minutes. Others believe it took half an hour, 2 squires, and divine intervention. You're now 25 minutes in and you've barely made it to the leg plates. Finally, the helmet. A great helm. Heavy, dome-shaped. Smells like the inside of a boiled boot. You slip it on and everything goes dim and echoey. Your breath bounces back into your face. Your vision narrows to 2 peepholes roughly the size of regret. Osric thumps you on the back. All ready, sir? You try to nod. Your neck disagrees. You take a step forward. Clang. Another. Clunk. By the third, you're convinced this is how turtles feel all the time. You reach the stairs. Oh no. There are 14 of them. Worn stone, slightly curved, no handrails, and absolutely zero dignity. Osric beams. Need a hand? You grunt and begin your descent. Step 1. Fine. Step 2. A little slippery. Step 3. Betrayal. You miss the edge. Your foot slides forward, your knee buckles, and you crash downward like a cannonball wrapped in bacon. Osric yelps and jumps out of the way as you hit the landing face first, visor slamming shut with a sound like a blacksmith's sneeze. The room goes silent. Sir? Osric's voice is tiny. Still alive? You wheeze from the floor. Yes, but only physically. Quirky fact. Despite popular portrayals, full plate armor didn't render knights immobile. Well-fitted suits allowed surprising flexibility. However, ill-fitted, second-hand, or poorly maintained armor, that's a rolling tin can of despair. You are currently that can. Eventually, with Osric's help, a rope pulley, and at least one prayer to St. Crispin, you make it upright again. Your knees throb. Your dignity is in critical condition. You shuffle to the courtyard. Everyone is already there. Other knights, squires, stable hands, even the reeve, sipping something suspicious from a cup. They all pretend not to stare at your limp. One of the older knights nods approvingly. Full kit today, eh? You nod slowly, because you cannot physically nod quickly. Looking ready for battle, he adds. You are not. You are ready for a nap, and a back massage, and a large ale followed by a long scream. But there's no time for comfort, because now comes the inspection. Your lord appears, flanked by 2 priests and a page holding a clipboard. Not a literal clipboard, just a wax tablet with a strong attitude. He paces down the line, stopping before each knight. Paul, good polish. Geoffrey, adjust that buckle. Thomas, is that rust? He reaches you. Stops. He squints. He circles. He lifts your visor without warning. You blink at him like a startled mole. He grunts. Decent, but your gorget's crooked. And what is that smell? You pause. Honor? He narrows his eyes. Osric coughs and points at your right sabaton. It's on backward. You feel your soul leave your body. Eventually, the Lord moves on. You exhale in rattling relief. That's when Osric whispers, "Next up, mounted drills." You curse gently under your breath, because if putting the armor on was hard, mounting a horse in it will be its own fresh nightmare. But that's a problem for 5 minutes from now. Right now, you're standing in 30 kilos of iron, wrapped in wool, sweating like a boiled turnip, and trying not to tip over. Welcome to knighthood. You're beginning to understand something profound. The enemy of the medieval knight wasn't just rival armies or rebellious peasants. It was breakfast. Or more specifically, eating breakfast while wearing most of a smithy on your torso. You're seated at a long wooden table in the outer hall, flanked by fellow knights who are similarly encased in clanking regret. A bowl of barley gruel sits steaming in front of you, and your gauntlets, shiny, noble, and completely useless for cutlery, are still strapped to your hands. You eye the spoon, then your gloves, then the spoon again. You try to pick it up. It launches like a catapult across the table and lands in someone else's gruel. He doesn't notice. He's too busy trying to butter a hunk of dark rye using the side of a dagger. You try again, this time using just your fingertips. Osric, ever eager, leans over and offers, "I could feed you, sir." You glare at him. He withers. Instead, you lift the bowl and attempt to drink the gruel like soup. It goes well for about 3 seconds, until the sticky sludge slides too fast and splashes your chin and neck plate. Hot barley paste drips slowly into your underarmor padding, where it will ferment for the next 4 hours. You sigh. You are not majestic. You are not heroic. You are, in fact, slightly sticky and lightly scalded. Outside, you hear the clang of sword drills already beginning in the yard. You don't have long. You wolf down the rest of your meal. If one can wolf a food that tastes like wet cardboard and guilt, and limp out into the sunlit courtyard. The light stabs your eyes. Your helmet acts like a convection oven. Within minutes, you are sweating from your ankles. Today's exercise is controlled sparring, which sounds reasonable until you remember that controlled is medieval for less screaming than usual. You line up across from Sir Edric, a seasoned knight with a nose like a knuckle and arms like cured hams. He lifts his sword and grins. "Gentle today, eh?" You nod. He doesn't go gentle. The moment the signal is given, he charges like a man who's owed rent. You barely raise your sword in time to block, and even then, the impact jars your entire skeleton. Your wrists sting, your ears ring. You stumble back, gasping. He presses forward. Steel sings. Your knees protest. You lurch to the side and swipe blindly. You miss by a mile. He laughs, the kind of laugh that says he's still got all his teeth and he knows you don't. Historians still argue how often knights really fought in training. Some records say it was weekly, if not daily. Others suggest more ceremonial sparring unless war was looming. But if today is any indication, it's a blood sport, and you're the undercooked entree. By the 3rd round, your arms are trembling, your breathing is shallow, and you suspect your left eye is seeing into next week. Finally, a merciful horn blast signals the end. You slump against a post. Osric rushes over with a wet cloth and some deeply unhelpful praise. "You looked very enthusiastic, sir." You groan. Then you sneeze, and a small rivet pops off your gauntlet. You take a moment to reflect on your choices. A knight's body, you're learning, is in a constant state of breakdown and patchwork. Bruises bloom beneath armor you can't even fully remove without help. Muscles ache in places you didn't know existed. And worst of all, there's no real medical plan. So, when you limp back into the keep, favoring your right side, the castle's physician greets you with all the warmth of a buzzard. "Sprain, is it?" he asks, eyeing your swollen wrist. You nod. He hands you a leather strap. "Bite." Before you can ask why, he produces a leech the size of your finger and slaps it onto your skin. You nearly faint. Quirky fact, leeches were a staple of medieval medicine, not just for infections. They were used for headaches, swelling, fevers, and, apparently, emotional wounds. No scientific basis, but plenty of commitment. Osric stands nearby, holding a bucket. "Just in case, sir." You gag quietly while the leech works. Afterward, the physician bandages your wrist in something that smells like vinegar and goat fur. "Avoid using it," he says. You look down at your sword arm. "Right," you say, deadpan. The leech drops into the bucket with a wet plop. You try not to bond with it. The rest of the afternoon is less physically traumatic, but no less exhausting. You attend a heraldic lesson in which a bored tutor lectures about lions rampant, eagles displayed, and boars passant, while you slowly lose the will to exist. You're also required to listen to a short sermon in the chapel, where the priest drones on about humility while wearing a gold-embroidered stole that cost more than your childhood home. Eventually, you're dismissed for evening meal. This time, you eat without the gauntlets. Small victory. Dinner is pottage, again. A gloopy mix of barley, onions, and mystery meat. Possibly pigeon. Possibly not meat at all. You eat quickly, ignoring the throb in your wrist and the increasingly bold stares of a dog who clearly wants to be knighted just to take your place. As the sun sinks, you retire to your quarters. You peel off your armor piece by agonizing piece. Each buckle feels like a betrayal. Each strap leaves a dent in your skin. Finally, you collapse onto your straw bed. Every limb aches. But at least the leech didn't come back. Small mercies. You fall asleep wondering what fresh pain tomorrow will bring. And whether Osric can be bribed into claiming you've been called away for spiritual penance for the next 3 days. You dream you're flying, soaring above castles, rivers, and fields, light as air. Then you wake up to find Osric is shaking your shoulder and you've drooled into your hair. Also, you can't feel your left leg, probably because your boot is still on and your foot is twisted under the bed frame. "Morning, sir," he chirps, as though the sun hasn't just betrayed you by rising. You sit up, and your back makes a noise like someone stepping on a basket of eggs. There's no time for stretching or groaning. Today is horsemanship, which sounds noble, majestic, cinematic. It is not. You hobble out into the stable yard where the air smells of hay, manure, and bitter resignation. Your steed is already saddled, a towering, muscle-bound destrier named Roland. He looks like he eats smaller horses for breakfast, possibly squires too. "Morning, Roland," you mumble. He huffs and stomps a hoof the size of your helmet. Now for the hard part, mounting. You approach the stirrup, eyeing it like a medieval puzzle box. Even in partial armor, you're carrying enough weight to collapse a bridge. You plant your foot, grip the pommel, and attempt to swing your leg up and over. You do not succeed. You grunt. You wiggle. You do a little hop. Osric clears his throat. "Want me to give you a boost?" "No." 10 minutes and one pulled groin later, you're finally in the saddle. Every part of your body is screaming, but you're upright and vaguely balanced. That's a win. Historians still argue how well-trained medieval knights were in horsemanship. Some claim they were born in the saddle. Others suggest many only became truly competent after years of trial and bruises. Judging by your current state, you fall into the trial and bruises category. Roland snorts and lurches forward without warning. You grip the reins like they're your last connection to this mortal plane. The trainer, a knight with a voice like gravel and the patience of a scorpion, barks instructions. "Trot around the perimeter. Keep your back straight." You wobble like a poorly secured barrel. Roland senses your weakness and veers slightly just to clip your knee on a post. You yelp. Osric winces. The horse smirks. Eventually, you get into a rhythm, a painful, bouncing rhythm that rearranges your internal organs. But it's progress. You circle the yard. You even manage a tight turn. A few stable hands applaud politely, possibly sarcastically. You pretend not to notice. Then comes lance practice. You're handed a long wooden lance, roughly the length of your pessimism. It's heavy, awkward, and completely uninterested in being helpful. "Lower it as you charge," the trainer shouts. "Aim for the quintain." The quintain is a spinning target with a shield on one side and a weighted arm on the other. Hit the shield, and the arm swings around to smack the inattentive. You take a deep breath. You nudge Roland into a trot, then a canter. You lower the lance. You miss the quintain entirely. The arm spins anyway and clocks you directly in the side of the helmet. Stars, pain, shame. Roland slows to a stop while you wheeze in confusion. Quirky fact: the quintain wasn't just used by knights, it was also a form of amusement at fairs, where locals would try their luck and often end up in the mud. So you've just completed a proud peasant pastime. Congratulations. After a few more attempts, you actually hit the target once. The quintain spins, the arm whizzes by, and, miraculously, you duck. Small victories. Then comes mounted swordplay. You're given a blunted blade and told to strike padded dummies as you pass them. You ride by the first one and completely whiff. The second, you graze with the tip. The third, you hit and drop your sword. It clatters to the ground. Osric runs after it like a terrier. By the end of the session, your inner thighs feel like they've been tenderized by an angry butcher. You dismount, slowly, with tears in your eyes, and your legs forget how to function. You walk like you've spent the night astride a spiked log. The other knights smirk. The horses look smug. You decide to skip lunch in favor of lying face down on a hay bale. Osric brings you a carrot, for comfort. Roland's favorite, he says. You stare at it. Tell him I said thanks. The rest of the afternoon is spent cleaning tack, saddles, bridles, stirrups, while pretending your back isn't plotting a full mutiny. Osric does most of the work while you sit nearby and supervise. Eventually, you stagger back inside. A hot bath is a distant dream. A cold basin of murky water is your reality. You splash your face, you remove your boots, you peel off your socks, which may now be a permanent part of your body. Dinner is bread, beans, and a roasted thing you do not identify. You eat in silence, legs twitching with ghost horse pain. Later, you visit the chapel. Not for prayer exactly, just for a moment of quiet where no one's yelling posture, or left flank, or, for the love of St. Cuthbert, duck. You sit on a stone bench and stare at a flickering candle. You whisper, "Never again, Roland." Tomorrow, of course, it will be again. But for now, you limp back to your chamber and collapse onto your bed with a sound like a drawbridge breaking. Your last thought before sleep takes you. Next time, you're going to be a monk or a fishmonger, anyone but a knight. It's another gray dawn in the keep, and as you stretch your aching limbs, one vertebra at a time, you're greeted by Osric holding a scroll and looking far too pleased with himself. "Chivalry lesson this morning, sir." You blink. Is that a threat? He doesn't answer. You groan and rise, your muscles pulling like old ropes. A brief glance out the window reveals mud, fog, and two chickens squabbling over what looks like a toenail. A perfect day for philosophical debate and societal expectations. After a quick splash of freezing water on your face, and an even quicker argument with your laces, you arrive in the upper solar, where the chivalry tutor, a gaunt man named Brother Reynold, awaits with a stack of parchment and a skull for dramatic effect. He gestures for you to sit. "Today," he begins in the sort of voice usually reserved for funerals, "we discuss virtue, courtly love, and the role of the knight as a moral beacon in a fallen world." You blink twice. He continues, eyes aflame. Honor, loyalty, courage, temperance, humility, justice, mercy. You try to write them down. Your quill snaps on temperance. Across the room, another knight in training is nodding vigorously, probably hoping to get noticed by the visiting baroness. You're just hoping the lesson ends before your brain leaks out your ears. Brother Reynold drones on. He describes the knight not as a warrior, but as a servant of ideals, a man who must be learned in scripture, poetry, and song, who must defend the weak, speak with grace, and flirt with elegance. He recites lines from the Knight's Lament, something about roses blooming on battlefields and the moon weeping silver tears. You're not sure if it's meant to be metaphor or an early warning sign of plague. Historians still argue how seriously the chivalric code was taken. Some claim knights held themselves to these lofty ideals. Others say it was mostly for show, a glossy layer of poetry on top of a very stabby profession. Judging by your peers, it's 70% lip service, 30% keeping your sword clean. After the lesson, you're ushered into the great hall for courtly manners practice. This is a new kind of horror. You must bow correctly, not too deep, not too shallow. Speak in flowery phrases without sounding like a drunken minstrel, and walk with graceful composure, which apparently excludes limping and muttering curses. Lady Matilda, a noblewoman with a bejeweled veil and the patience of a wasp, is here to assist. You bow. She nods. Osric beams. You attempt small talk. "So, lovely fog we're having?" She blinks. You scramble. "I mean, mist-kissed dawn, draped in silver." She nods slowly, clearly weighing whether you're eccentric or concussed. Osric whispers, "Try a compliment." You squint. "Your sleeves are most voluminous." She frowns. You backpedal into a nervous curtsy and knock over a stool. Courtly love is hard. Later, you and the other squires gather in the chapel for rhetoric practice. Each of you is handed a parchment with a question. Yours reads, "Is it more noble to serve a just lord or a just cause?" You pause. Osric looks over your shoulder. "Write both." You do, followed by, "Or neither, if the stew is good." He doesn't correct you. Quirky fact. Some knights wrote actual poetry. Some even composed songs for ladies they'd never spoken to. Others had scribes do it for them and took credit. You, however, are now trying to rhyme valor with cellar. You fail. After a brief lunch of pottage, again, and turnip pie, why? You're summoned to a nearby orchard for diplomacy practice with visiting envoys. You stand at attention while your lord explains land boundaries, tithes, and marriage treaties. You nod like you understand. You do not. One envoy sneezes on the map. Another mispronounces your name. You try to respond politely but end up saying, "Very moist weather today," which is not correct in any language. Afterward, you receive a commendable effort ribbon. Osric wears it like a medal. By evening, you're back in the solar for more reading. This time, it's L'Amour to Darther. The tale of noble deeds, tragic fates, and a sword no one can pull from a stone except one very special chosen guy. You yawn halfway through Sir Gawain's speech about destiny. The candlelight flickers. Your eyes blur. Brother Reynolds suddenly asks, "What is the noblest act a knight can perform?" You reply, "Not falling asleep in this chair." There's a pause. He writes something on his parchment. You're not sure if it's a commendation or a prayer request. After prayers, you stagger to your quarters. Osric follows, reading aloud a love poem he found in the latrine. Something about flaxen hair and stolen gloves. You collapse onto your straw bed. You whisper to the ceiling, "If I write one more poem, I'm joining the enemy." Tomorrow, you're told, is a tournament. But tonight, you sleep, your dreams full of rhyming nightmares and ladies with endless sleeves. The courtyard is humming with anticipation, like a beehive full of armor and terrible decision-making. Today is tournament day, which means everything hurts, nothing fits quite right, and you're about to make an absolute fool of yourself in front of at least 5 minor nobles, 3 large chickens, and 1 suspicious goat tied to a post. Osric is fussing with your helmet straps while babbling about glory and valor and trying not to vomit again like last time. You gently push his hands away and stare across the tilt yard where the lists have been laid out, flat earth, heavy with churned mud and trampled dignity. You're up first in the joust, because of course you are. "Remember," Osric says, handing you your lance like it's a flower bouquet. "Aim low, but not too low, and don't forget to breathe. Or blink. Or just don't die." You mount Roland, who, as usual, looks personally offended to be part of this entire event. The herald steps forward, announcing your name with an unnecessary number of flourishes. The crowd, all 17 people, gives a mild smattering of applause. One child waves. You feel vaguely queasy. Your opponent is Sir Aldrich of Thornfield, a brick-shaped man with a shield covered in axes and what might be grape jelly. You hope it's jelly. The horn sounds. Roland lurches forward. You hold the lance steady. You count the seconds. 1, mud sprays. 2, you pick up speed. 3, Sir Aldrich looks bigger. 4, you scream. 5 impact. The world becomes a blur of iron, dirt, and your own groaning. You hit the ground like a bag of wet armor. Your visor snaps shut, your ears ring, and you taste the faint hint of regret and earthworms. You're not unconscious, which is disappointing. Osric rushes to your side. "You almost stayed on this time." You stare at him through the slit in your helmet. Almost? Historians still argue whether jousts were primarily sporting events or serious training exercises. Some tournaments were formal pageants with strict rules and prizes. Others were barely contained chaos, complete with real injuries and even fatalities. You just know your shoulder has given up on the concept of ball and socket. Later, after 3 more tilts, 2 of which end with you face down in the hay, you're allowed to change gear for melee combat. This means you and about a dozen other knights get tossed into a large ring and instructed to fight with honor, which apparently includes elbowing someone in the throat and throwing sand in people's eyes. The horn sounds again. It's chaos, steel clashing, shouting, boots thudding. You parry a blow from behind, dodge a wild swing, and accidentally trip over your own scabbard. You fall. Someone falls on top of you. You apologize to their shin. A third person lands beside you and shouts, "For glory!" before immediately getting smacked with a blunt axe. At some point, you realize you've lost your sword. You try to retrieve it, but end up getting tackled by a knight who smells like onions and righteous indignation. Osric is cheering from the sidelines like this is the finals of a cabbage fair. You crawl to the edge of the field and pretend to be unconscious. No one notices. Eventually, the horn blows to end the melee. You drag yourself upright and limp toward the edge. You don't win anything, except perhaps a mild concussion and a broken buckle. Quirky fact: the most prestigious tournaments often offered real prizes: gold, war horses, even land. You, however, are awarded a small ribbon that says, "Good hustle." The next event is archery. You're not an archer, but apparently all knights must participate for entertainment. You're handed a longbow the length of your spine and told to draw and release with poise. You draw, you release. The arrow skitters 6 feet and embeds in a cabbage behind the target. Osric claps politely. The crowd has moved on to watching a falconer juggle. By the time you're released from the tournament grounds, you're sore in places that weren't even sore yesterday. Your right elbow clicks. Your neck has developed a new tilt. You smell of sweat, stale ale, and a distinct note of hoarse disapproval. The evening feast is meant to celebrate the day's victories. Long trestle tables groan with food: roasted pig, trenchers of stew, tarts, fruits. You stab your meat with a dull knife and try not to fall asleep into your own plate. A minstrel strums a lute and sings about valiant Sir Benedict, which might be you, though he describes the hero as undefeated in battle and beloved by all maidens. So, probably not. There's a drinking contest. You abstain. After your last encounter with spiced wine and a staircase, you're not taking chances. By late evening, a bard begins reciting heroic tales by candlelight. You listen, half dreaming, as he recounts impossible duels, fire-breathing beasts, and knights with golden swords who never tripped over their own greaves. You glance down at your armor, dented, stained, and somehow missing a rivet. You lean toward Osric and whisper, "I'm pretty sure that dragon would have eaten me in one gulp." He nods solemnly. "But you would have tasted honorable, sir." That makes you laugh, or maybe cry. You're too tired to tell. Back in your chamber, you peel off the armor one last time. You lower yourself onto the straw mattress with a sigh that echoes down the hallway. You've survived the tournament. Barely. And tomorrow? Tomorrow is laundry day. Morning arrives not with the blare of trumpets or the call of glory, but with the sound of Osric thwacking your door and shouting, "Time to do laundry, sir." You consider pretending to be dead, but unfortunately, the smell wafting from your armor pile suggests you may actually become dead if you don't address it soon. You shuffle out of bed, bones clicking like dice in a cup, and pull on a tunic that doesn't smell too offensive. Your fingers are still bruised from yesterday's melee, and your back feels like someone stored a rake under your skin. But today, there are no swords to swing or lances to shatter, just a mountain of grimy garments and the cold stone steps down to the wash yard. The laundry area is behind the kitchens near the servants' quarters. There, a line of wash tubs waits like an accusation. You and several other knights in training have been invited to help clean your linens, tunics, hose, and especially your gambesons, the thick, quilted under-armor jackets now stiff with sweat, oil, and the tears of your ancestors. You dunk one into the steaming water and immediately regret it. The stench is indescribable. If evil had a scent, this would be it. You gag. Osric, already elbow-deep in soap, chirps. Use lye soap and beat it against the stone, sir. Really get the crust off. You nod weakly. Crust should never be used to describe clothing. Historians still argue how often medieval knights actually did their own laundry. Most suggest that servants or squires did the bulk of the work, but squires themselves were often overworked and underexperienced. You're currently living proof that nobody wins here. You scrub, you rinse, you beat the tunic on a flat rock until it resembles a wet tortilla. You repeat the process for your socks, which Osric handles with tongs. They tried to flee this morning, he jokes. Laundry takes hours. The water cools. Your knuckles are raw. Your gambeson refuses to dry evenly, and there's a suspiciously slimy corner that might never come clean. But eventually, everything is washed, wrung out, and draped over lines to dry in the uncertain sun. As you step back, satisfied, a bird immediately relieves itself on your freshly laundered hose. You consider taking up archery again. You trudge back to the keep to change. There's no hot bath waiting, just a basin and a damp rag. You clean the visible dirt from your arms and sigh deeply into the cold. After a modest lunch of cheese, ale, and what may or may not be pickled turnip, you're summoned to the armory. Because laundry, of course, includes armor maintenance. The armorer is a gruff man named Theobald who speaks only in grunts and gestures. He hands you a sack of sand, a lump of beeswax, and a cloth. Then he points at your helmet and mimics "scrub harder" with the urgency of a man who has seen too many rusted breastplates. You get to work. Scrubbing iron with sand is about as fun as it sounds. Your arms ache almost instantly. The wax helps a little, but not much. And the smell? A heady mix of metal, sweat, and old lard. Still, piece by piece, you polish your armor until it's less disgraceful. Not shining, not gleaming, just tolerable. Quirky fact: medieval knights often had their armor maintained by professional smiths between campaigns, but for day-to-day upkeep, they and their squires had to deal with grime, dents, and rust. Some used vinegar or urine for cleaning. You stick to sand. Barely. By the time your armor is stowed and your hands are stained a permanent gray, the sun is dipping behind the walls of the keep. But the day's not done. No, you're due in the kitchens now. Because part of training, apparently, includes understanding the full life of the household, which means peeling root vegetables until your thumbs cramp. The kitchen is hot, chaotic, and filled with smoke. Women bustle about carrying baskets, scraping pots, yelling instructions over the din. A pig is being slowly roasted near the hearth. You're handed a knife and a pile of parsnips. You peel. Slowly. Badly. Osric peels twice as fast. I used to do this for my mother. Is she a knight? No, he says proudly. A pie maker. You peel faster. The cook scolds you for wasting too much good skin. You apologize to the parsnip. Eventually, the meal is ready. Rabbit stew, dark bread, onions soaked in vinegar. You eat in the scullery, seated on a crate, watching smoke curl toward the beams. It's strangely peaceful, until you're assigned dish duty. Scraping dried porridge off trenchers with a dull blade is the lowest point of your nightly career so far, and that includes getting tackled by a man with an axe tattooed on his eye. But you endure it, because no one becomes a knight without enduring everything else first. You finally crawl into bed near midnight. Your hands are pruned. Your tunic still smells faintly of cabbage. Your arms twitch involuntarily from hours of scrubbing and sanding. You mutter, "Tomorrow, I better get to stab something." Osric, from his pallet, replies sleepily, "Only if the laundry's dry." You wake up to the sound of church bells, their dull, mournful clang bouncing around your skull like an anvil in a barrel. You sit up, immediately regretting every choice that brought you to this point, particularly the decision to sleep in your slightly damp hose. Osric is already awake, lacing his tunic while humming what sounds like a funeral dirge, but might just be his happy tune. "Today's the long march, sir," he chirps. "Training exercise, 5 miles in full armor." You stare at him. Why? He shrugs. Because real battles don't wait for comfortable weather or better shoes? Fair enough. You eat breakfast without tasting it. Just another bowl of pottage, lukewarm and vaguely salty. Then it's time to armor up, again. The leather straps cut into your shoulders like sharp intentions. The breastplate digs into your collarbone. By the time you secure your greaves, you're already sweating like a blacksmith in July. The sun is barely up. The march begins. You trudge out of the castle gates with a dozen other night trainees, all clanking and groaning like poorly made wind chimes. Each step is an exercise in pain management. Your thighs burn. Your back howls. Your left heel is staging a quiet rebellion. And this is mile 1. The commander, a grizzled man with a voice like old gravel and no discernible sense of humor, leads from the front. He calls out orders every so often. "Tighter formation. Mind the ditch. Try not to step in the dung." You step in the dung. The countryside is beautiful if you could see it through the sweat in your eyes. Rolling hills, grazing sheep, distant church spires. And every few hundred yards, a peasant giving your group the same look, a mix of awe and "what are they doing tromping through my barley?" Historians still argue how much time knights actually spent marching in armor. Some sources suggest it was rare. Horses were preferred whenever possible. Others argue these foot marches were vital for endurance. You're now certain that someone, somewhere, once died of thigh chafe. At mile 2, your feet go numb. This is an improvement. At mile 3, your water flask is empty, and someone in the rear is loudly regretting last night's onion pie. At mile 4, your helmet starts to rattle every time you breathe. Osric tightens it with a shoelace. You try not to think about it. Finally, at mile 5, you collapse under a tree and pretend you're a rock, but you're not done. "Form a camp," the commander shouts, which is how you find yourself learning how to pitch a medieval tent while covered in sweat and misery. You hammer pegs into uneven ground. You erect poles that collapse instantly. You tie knots that Osric immediately unties for safety. You unroll a bedroll that smells like old goat. Lunch is dried beef, cheese, and water warm enough to make tea. You eat lying down, watching birds overhead. One looks like it's laughing at you. Then comes defensive drill, digging shallow trenches around the tent and constructing a crude palisade out of sticks and rope. You're not defending against anyone today, but the commander insists you treat it as though your life depends on it. Osric names the palisade Stick Wall the Unyielding. You salute it. Quirky fact, some medieval field camps were incredibly complex, with perimeter ditches, watch rotations, and mess protocols. Others were just tents dumped in a wet field. Today, you're somewhere in the middle. Wet field, earnest effort. By mid-afternoon, the real torment begins. Formation maneuvers. You line up in full gear, shield in hand, and practice advancing, retreating, pivoting, and holding formation under imaginary fire. It's not the physical movement that kills you. It's doing it all with armor biting into your shoulders and your lungs gasping for air like fish in a desert. "Shield wall!" the commander roars. You raise your shield. It trembles slightly. "Brace!" Your knees buckle. "Advance!" You take one step and feel your calf seize like a rusted gate. You whisper to Osric, "If I collapse, roll me downhill. Say I died with honor." He nods. I'll even add a poem. By the time dusk arrives, you're coated in mud, sweat, and something that might be beet stew from lunch. You dismantle camp with the grace of a startled cow and begin the march back. Slow, uneven, punctuated by quiet cursing and the occasional dropped helmet. Back at the keep, you strip off your armor piece by piece, each one leaving behind a trail of aches and bruises. You don't even bother with water. You just collapse onto your straw bed and stare at the rafters. Then Osric pipes up from his corner. "You know, sir, I think we did quite well." You grunt. "We didn't get attacked, no one fainted, and only 2 of us cried." You raise one finger. He pauses. "Okay, 1.5. You both laugh. A ragged, sore laugh that sounds more like a dying goose. Then the bell rings again. You groan. What now? Evening prayers. You consider spiritual rebellion, but instead you rise, joints cracking like walnuts in a press, and shuffle off to the chapel with the rest of the knights. You kneel on a cold stone floor, hands folded, eyes closed. The priest murmurs about patience, virtue, and the glory of service. You whisper to Osric, "Next time I'm marching into a tavern and not out." He grins. Amen to that. It's before dawn when Osric tiptoes in, candle in hand, whispering like a conspirator. "Sir, it's falconry day." You groan, loudly. Yes, but listen," he continues, tugging at your blanket. "No swords, no marching, just birds." You lift one eyelid. "Do I have to fly?" "No, they do." He's beaming. You're exhausted. But the idea of a day with minimal bruising sounds almost luxurious. So you shuffle to your feet, throw on a tunic that doesn't itch too badly, and head out to the mews, the wooden enclosure where the falcons, hawks, and one very untrustworthy owl are housed. You're introduced to a female peregrine falcon named Sibylla. She glares at you as if you've already disappointed her, which is probably fair. The falconer, Master Alaric, is a thin man with hawk-like features himself, sharp nose, sharp eyes, sharp elbows. He speaks softly but quickly, explaining jesses, hoods, lures, and the proper way to extend your gloved fist like an avian landing pad. Sibylla lands on your arm with surprising force. Her talons dig in just enough to remind you that while she's technically your hunting partner, she's also perfectly capable of removing your earlobe. "Gently now," Alaric whispers. She can sense fear. "She must be having a feast," you mumble. You spend the morning walking through misty fields, Sibylla perched stoically on your arm, eyes scanning the grass for movement. Occasionally she flaps, shifts, tightens her grip, then stills again. The air smells of damp earth and crushed herbs. A brook bubbles somewhere nearby. It's quiet, peaceful. You start to think, this might actually be kind of nice. Then Sibylla screeches and takes off without warning, just a streak of feathers and fury in the morning sun. She dives, twists midair, and vanishes into the tree line. You blink. Osric claps. She saw a rabbit. Or a hat? Could have been either. You squint into the woods, unsure whether to follow or simply declare her sovereign of the forest now. Falconry, historians note, was a noble pastime, a symbol of status and refinement, often reserved for the elite. Some lords kept dozens of birds, each trained for specific prey. Others just wanted to look majestic with something feathered on their arm. You suspect Sibylla is less interested in appearances and more in carnage. Alaric eventually whistles, twirls his lure, a leather pouch on a cord, and Sibylla reappears like a feathery missile. She lands gracefully, on his arm. You feel betrayed. "Try again," he says. You do. Eventually, Sibylla lands on your glove, not gently, but deliberately. She accepts a morsel of meat with what might be begrudging tolerance. Progress. The rest of the morning is spent learning calls, lure swings, and how to recognize when your bird wants to hunt versus when it wants to murder your boot. Osric takes to it quickly. His kestrel, a plucky little thing named Moth, sits politely and coos. You glance at Sibylla. She narrows her eyes. After lunch, bread, cheese, apples, and a mug of something herbal that may have been intended as shoe polish, you're summoned to the hunting field. Today is boar tracking, not hunting. Tracking. Because actual boar hunting involves spears, horses, and a high probability of being gored into early sainthood. You're starting with the easy part, finding signs of where the boar was, not where it currently is. You're handed a walking stick and a crude map. Your guide, a local tracker named Hilda, is missing 3 fingers and has the exact expression of someone who's met a boar face to snout and won, barely. You follow her into the woods, stepping over roots, ducking under branches, and pretending you're not terrified of twigs that snap too loudly. Hilda points out broken saplings, droppings, hoof prints. She speaks in short bursts, like a woman who trusts trees more than people. You nod like you understand, but really, you're still thinking about the falcon. "Boar was here last night," she says. "Might still be nearby." You freeze. Nearby how? She shrugs. Could be miles. Could be under that bush. Osric jumps. You all continue. Hours pass. You find more signs. Churned earth, claw marks on a tree, a tuft of coarse bristle caught on a thorn. Quirky fact. In some regions, knights were required to demonstrate skill in tracking and hunting as proof of their land stewardship. It wasn't just about combat. It was about knowing the lay of the land, reading its signs, and not getting eaten by its more irritable residents. Eventually, Hilda decides you've done all right for squires. She leads you back to the keep, occasionally tossing acorns at squirrels who get too bold. You arrive just before dusk. Back in the yard, Sibylla is resting on her perch, preening like she owns the world. Osric hands you a plum. "She's fond of purple." "Probably." You nod, exhausted, and toss the plum near her. She snatches it from the air, not to eat, just to drop dramatically. Later, during supper, turnip pie again somehow. There's talk of a falconry competition coming in a fortnight. Alaric looks at you with one raised brow. You think he's impressed, or maybe constipated. Hard to say. Afterward, you sit outside your chamber, boots off, staring at the stars. Osric joins you with a candle stub and half a biscuit. "I think Sibylla likes you now," he says. "She landed on me." "She didn't bite." You nod. "That's love. in bird terms. Tomorrow is back to weapons drills, but tonight you close your eyes to the memory of wings slicing through morning mist, talons outstretched, fierce and free. Maybe falconry isn't so bad after all. Today begins with a shrill whistle and the sharp clatter of wooden practice swords being dumped onto the tilt yard. Weapons drills. Again. Your body groans in protest as you pull yourself upright, feeling like you've aged a decade in your sleep. Osric is already dressed and stretching his arms like he's about to run a race. "We're sparring with real shields today," he says, grinning as if this is somehow exciting and not just an invitation for bruises in new places. You dress slowly, layering your gambeson, cinching your belt, and mentally preparing for the controlled chaos of the day ahead. Out on the field, the master-at-arms, a man built like a barrel of hammers, paces before you and the other squires. Today we focus on rhythm, stance, and, above all, endurance, he barks. Because in battle, the man who tires last usually wins. He pairs you with Godric, a broad-shouldered lad with a chin like a battering ram and the personality of a very polite fence post. You nod to each other and take your stances, shields raised, swords at the ready, breath slow. The whistle blows. Godric lunges. You block, step back, swing low, dodge right, all in about 2 seconds before your shield is rattling against your ear and you're tasting gravel. You pop back up, shake it off, and reset. This happens 12 more times. Sparring is brutal. Not because it's dangerous, your swords are blunted and the strikes are controlled, but because it never, ever stops. The master shouts for tighter guard, better footwork, cleaner strikes. You adjust, adapt, sweat pouring into your eyes. Historians still argue about the day-to-day combat training of medieval knights. Some believe it was constant, methodical, and structured. Others suggest many knights learned more from battlefield experience than daily drilling. Judging by your current state, sore, dizzy, and trying not to vomit, it was probably both, with a healthy dose of trial by bruising. Eventually, you're given a moment to rest. Osric flops down next to you, his tunic soaked. "I counted 5 solid hits," he pants. 3 of them were to the back of my head. You hold up your thumb. "Better than 6. After the break comes shield wall practice. This is new. You and 8 others are lined up shoulder to shoulder, shields interlocked, spears angled forward. The master shouts, positions, timing, advance, halt, pivot. It's not elegant, but when it works, it feels like you're part of a living beast, solid, impenetrable, terrifying. Then a line of squires charges from the other end of the field. You brace. They slam into your wall. The impact is like a wagon hitting a fence. Shields crack. Someone loses a helmet. You dig in your heels and scream louder than you meant to. Still, you hold. Later, the master pats you on the back, hard enough to realign your spine. Better, not good, but better. Osric glows. "We didn't fall." You manage a smile. Mostly. After the drills, you're rewarded with a new lesson, sword forms, not just swinging wildly, but elegant combinations, stances named after animals, cuts meant to deceive, parries that flow like poetry, if poetry came with the constant threat of broken fingers. You practice in pairs, then solo, then again with the group. Your arms ache. Your hips feel loose. But eventually, something clicks. Your footwork feels more natural. The blade moves faster, cleaner. Quirky fact: some knightly orders created formal books of arms, filled with illustrations of combat poses and strategic moves, early martial arts manuals. Of course, your manual today is a stick in the mud tracing foot patterns. As the sun dips low, the master finally calls a halt. Clean your gear, then supper. You've earned it. You stagger back to the keep, fingers twitching from gripping the sword too long. Osric walks beside you, cradling a small bruise on his nose. "I think we're improving," he says. You nod. "I only dropped my weapon twice." Progress. Supper is thick stew with chunks of something vaguely meaty, hunks of brown bread and beer strong enough to clean your armor. You eat in silence, soaking in the warmth and the stillness. Then, a surprise. You're summoned to the chapel, not for prayer, but for an audience with a traveling fencing master. He's a wiry man with a crooked smile and eyes like flint. He's here to demonstrate advanced swordplay. You try to sit up straighter. He draws his blade, not some brutish longsword, but a sleek, narrow thing. Then he begins. The movements are fast, fluid, precise. He spins, feints, pivots, lands blows without touching. It's like watching someone dance with lightning. He finishes and bows. You applaud, genuinely impressed. Then he asks for a volunteer. Everyone steps back. Osric steps forward. You whisper, "Are you insane?" He grins. Just a little. They spar gently. Osric holds his own for 3 whole moves before the master disarms him and sends his sword spinning through the air, where it lands with a clatter near the altar. Osric bows deeply. "I learned much." "Like how to fly?" "Exactly." The fencing master chuckles and gives a short speech about honor, control, and the difference between aggression and precision. You take mental notes when you're not thinking about how badly your calves are cramping. By the time you return to your chamber, night has fully claimed the sky. You collapse onto your straw bed, still half dreaming of lunges and parries, of shields locking and swords flashing. Osric mutters from his corner, "Tomorrow's horse training." You groan. "I still haven't recovered from yesterday's horse training." But the room is already spinning gently. And despite the bruises, despite the sweat, despite the sharp pain in your armpit, you fall asleep smiling. You're not a knight yet. But today, you moved like one. The scent of hay, leather, and pure animal resentment hits you the moment you step into the stables. Horse training. Again. Roland, your steed, is already awake and chewing on a mouthful of hay with the same slow defiance as someone who knows you're going to try and ride him, and plans to make you regret it. Osric is brushing his horse, a gentle gelding named Pebble, who tolerates his affection with something approaching indifference. "Good morning, sir," he says, cheerfully picking straw out of Pebble's tail. "Today we ride with armor." You consider turning around. But the stable master, a man whose face looks permanently wind-chapped, calls you forward. "Mount up, full kit. We're practicing charges." You glance at Roland. He glances back. It is not a friendly glance. Getting into armor is already exhausting. Doing it before a ride feels like trying to dress in chainmail while balancing on a unicycle. By the time your breastplate is buckled and your gauntlets are on, you're sweating like a tavern drum. You lead Roland into the yard. He snorts, sidesteps, and gives the distinct impression he'd rather be anywhere else. You mount, slowly and awkwardly. He does not move. "Kick him gently," Osric calls out from his saddle. You nudge with your heels. Roland steps backwards. The stablemaster shouts, "Show him who's in command!" You lean forward. Roland, please. He farts, loudly. Eventually, you coax him forward into a slow trot. Historians still argue how much control medieval knights truly had over their war horses. Some texts suggest these beasts were highly trained and obedient. Others argue they were massive, headstrong, and just as likely to ruin a battle plan out of spite. Today, Roland appears firmly in the agent of chaos category. The training exercise begins with basic maneuvers, left turns, right turns, halts. Roland responds to approximately 1/3 of your commands, mostly the ones he was about to do anyway. You practice riding with one hand, balancing your wooden lance in the other. It's heavy, awkward, and absolutely not aerodynamic. You make a mental note to thank your enemies in advance for standing still. Next comes the charge practice. A line of dummies is set up along a track. You're expected to ride at speed and knock the stuffing out of them. You watch as Osric goes first. Pebble gallops gracefully. Osric lowers his lance, and wham! The dummy explodes in a satisfying flurry of straw. Then it's your turn. You steady the lance. You check your grip. You whisper a quiet plea to Roland. He takes off like a thunderbolt. You scream like a kettle. Your lance wobbles. The dummy gets closer. You brace. You miss. Roland veers left and your lance swings wide, catching the edge of the dummy's shoulder, but not enough to do real damage. You keep going for another 20 yards before managing to haul him to a stop. You grazed it, Osric calls out. That's something. You try again, and again. By the fourth charge, you connect cleanly. Roland still hates you, but he's tolerating your presence on his back. Slightly. Quirky fact: some knights trained their horses to bite or kick in battle, making them living weapons. Roland, however, seems content to weaponize emotional sabotage. After charging drills, you practice mounted turns, tight formations, and, horrifyingly, riding backwards. That last one results in you nearly falling off and clutching Roland's mane like a drowning man. By midday, your legs are jelly, your spine feels like a stack of planks, and your inner thighs are deeply resentful. You dismount with a grunt that sounds suspiciously like a prayer. Lunch is bread, beans, and ale. You sit cross-legged in the grass, legs trembling. Roland stands nearby, chewing loudly and ignoring your existence. Osric flops down beside you. I think Pebble smiled when I hit the dummy. You groan. Roland's smile is violence. After lunch, the training intensifies. Now it's mounted combat drills. You're given a padded club and instructed to ride past a wooden post and hit a suspended bag of sand. Hard. The first swing nearly spins you out of your saddle. The second lands, but sends shockwaves up your arm. The third, you hit the rope instead, and the bag twirls like a smug dancer. Then, paired sparring. You and Osric circle each other, swatting and blocking with all the grace of two drunk scarecrows. Somehow, you manage a clean strike to his shield. He yells, "Victory!" You yell, "Cramp." The stablemaster claps once. "Decent. Could be worse." You beam. Osric beams. Roland blinks. By the end of the day, you're covered in dust, sweat, and at least 2 new bruises shaped suspiciously like hoofprints. You lead Roland back to his stall. He stops, turns, and presses his head gently into your chest for a moment. Then he sneezes directly into your face. You wipe your eyes and mutter, "Love you too." Evening comes. Supper is roasted leeks and mashed beans. You can barely lift your spoon. Osric props his head on one hand and mutters about saddles being medieval torture devices. Before sleep, you stretch, slowly, painfully, whispering thanks to whatever ancient spirit didn't let you fall off during that last backward ride. You crawl into bed, your legs throb, your arms ache, your lower back might have retired. But somewhere in the stables, Roland is probably dreaming of hay, sunlight, and possibly murdering a scarecrow. And honestly, so are you. Morning light slips through the slits in the shutters, casting narrow blades across the stone floor. You wake stiff and sore again, and your left hand feels like it's gripping an invisible sword. You flex your fingers slowly, cursing both weapon drills and your questionable life choices. Osric is already up, humming tunelessly as he ties his hose. "What fresh torment today?" you ask, voice gravelly. He grins. "Court manners." You blink. "What?" "Court manners," he repeats, brushing imaginary dust from his tunic. How to bow, how to speak, how not to offend someone rich enough to have you whipped for sneezing. You groan. Somehow, this sounds worse than sparring. You head to the great hall, where benches have been cleared and replaced with narrow rows of chairs. A stern woman in a violet gown stands at the front, Lady Marjolaine, mistress of etiquette. She surveys the squires with an expression that suggests she's already deeply disappointed. "Today," she says, voice sharp enough to cut linen, "you will learn how not to embarrass yourselves at court." You sit straighter. So does everyone else. She begins with posture. No slouching, no fidgeting, no scratching. Yes, even if your gambison itches, especially then. You attempt perfect stillness. Your knee immediately decides to twitch. Next comes bowing. There are degrees, she explains. For a baron, a slight dip. For a count, deeper. For royalty, your nose meets your boots. Try not to fall. You take your turn. You bow too far. You stumble. Osric catches you. Lady Marjolaine sighs deeply. You learn how to address nobles. My lord, my lady, your grace, your majesty. Never oi or friend or mate. You practice formal greetings until your tongue forgets what words feel like. Then, table manners. You are seated at a mock table and presented with trenchers of day-old bread. Wooden bowls, spoons, knives, but no forks. Forks, she reminds you with a sniff, are still foreign in many places, barbaric even. You resist the urge to say anything about your current lifestyle. Eat slowly, she instructs. Small bites. Chew quietly. Don't speak with your mouth full. And under no circumstances do you spit bones into your hand. Osric raises a brow. What if it's a big bone? She glares. He lowers his eyes. You practice sipping from a goblet, standing behind a chair. Not scratching. Again. Historians still argue how widespread these manners were among knights. Some believe many noble courts enforced strict etiquette. Others point out that rough soldiers often attended banquets just long enough to eat and shout poetry before falling asleep in the soup. You try to imagine yourself at a feast. Velvet tunic, warm fire, music. The table filled with roasted birds and honey-drenched apples. Then Roland stomps into your mind and ruins the scene. Quirky fact. In some noble circles, burping was considered a compliment to the chef. In others, it was grounds for ejection. You resolve to study regional customs very carefully. After lunch, gruel and wilted greens, You're sent to music lessons. Yes, music. You are handed a lute. It's missing a string. Osric is given a recorder. Within seconds, he produces a sound that makes 3 dogs bark and a chicken flee the yard. The music master, a man with a pained smile and an expression that suggests he deeply regrets his career choices, demonstrates a few chords, then gestures for you to copy them. Your fingers fumble. You pluck. You strum. It sounds like someone strangling a harp with mittens. Better, he says unconvincingly. Osric produces another terrible whistle. The chicken doesn't return. The master switches tactics and has you clap rhythms. You clap too fast, then too slow. Eventually, you clap in sync. Small victory. Even knights must entertain sometimes, he explains. A well-played tune is worth more than a sword in a courtly hall. You decide your sword is far more useful. Even with your footwork, evening approaches. You're sent to the chapel to learn courtly speech. The chaplain reads from a scroll of romantic poetry. You are asked to repeat it. Thine eyes do sparkle like stars at gloaming. You sneeze. Osric giggles. You both get whacked gently with a rolled-up scroll. Then you try again. Thine thighs do sparkle. The chaplain coughs loudly. Eyes, squire. You cough louder. Eyes, yes, sorry. The sun sets. You practice walking with grace, 1 foot in front of the other, not stomping like a duck in boots. You practice drawing your sword without looking like a butcher. You practice smiling politely while being insulted. Lady Marjolaine tests your progress with a mock reception. You bow. You say, Your Grace. You sip wine without dribbling. You listen to Osric perform a recorder solo without flinching, though barely. She nods. Sufficient. You both beam like children awarded their first crust of bread. That night, in your chamber, you flop onto your bed and sigh. You know, Osric says, lying upside down on his mattress, I think I'd rather fight 2 men with halberds than recite another love poem. You chuckle. You're lucky you didn't have to bow to the chicken. He nods. She would have pecked my eyes. You fall asleep to the faint sound of Osric softly humming his recorder tune, the least soothing melody ever invented, and the quiet assurance that no matter how much you've suffered this week, at least you didn't burp at a duchess. Yet. It's raining. Not a gentle drizzle either, the kind of rain that soaks your boots before you've finished lacing them. That turns stable straw into soup. That makes the sky feel heavy, like it's pressing down on everything you love, including your aching knees. You sigh. Osric holds a thin wool cloak above both your heads as you hurry to the outer yard, where today's lesson awaits. Siege defense. Because nothing says good morning like learning how to pour boiling oil on people from a castle wall. You arrive at the ramparts already drenched. The instructor, Sir Dunwald, whose face appears carved from wet granite, stands beneath a canopy of oiled canvas, scowling as if rain offends him personally. Castles fall when they are unprepared. He growls. You will prepare. He leads you and a small group of squires through the basics, positions on the wall walk, where to store spare quarrels and rocks, how to rotate shifts, how not to fall off when returning fire. Your armor squelches. You try not to shiver. First lesson, archery defense. You're handed a short bow and told to aim through a crenel, then fire downward. The target is a dummy painted to look very angry. You miss. Twice. Osric hits the dummy's knee. Wounded. Sir Dunwald frowns. Wounded is still dangerous. Aim for throat, chest, or eye. You don't say it, but the dummy's not even moving. Real invaders won't stand politely still while you fumble with soggy arrows. Second lesson, drop zone mechanics. You're handed a bucket of pebbles and shown the murder holes, small gaps in the ceiling of the gate passage. You take turns pouring debris onto a painted board meant to resemble an invader's head. The pebbles clatter. It's not glamorous, Dunwald admits, but it works. Historians still debate the prevalence of boiling liquids in siege defense. Some say hot sand or quicklime were far more common. Others insist that boiling oil was more a literary threat than a logistical reality. You're just relieved you're not the one standing under the murder hole today. Third lesson, scalding simulation. You're given a heavy cauldron, thankfully filled with lukewarm water, and shown how to maneuver it to the parapet safely. Osric immediately spills his on his own foot. He squeals. Sir Dunwald does not react. Always test wind direction before you pour, the knight growls. And don't scald your own men. You nod solemnly, swearing to let someone else do the pouring. Then comes the defensive crossbow drill. You're stationed behind a merlin, handed a crossbow, and given one bolt. The mechanism is stiff. The string resists. By the time you line up the shot, your fingers are trembling from cold. The bolt flies, hits the edge of the dummy shield, and glances off into the grass. Wounded, Osric says again, encouragingly. You're starting to suspect Osric's tactical strategy is to lightly inconvenience the enemy into submission. Afternoon brings a break in the clouds. The sun peers out, half-heartedly. The wall stones steam gently, and your gloves begin to dry, just in time to get soaked again. Now you learn how to repair a breach. You're brought to a training wall, a wooden mock-up already smashed in one section. You and the other squires are tasked with sealing the breach using whatever you can find: planks, rope, dirt, barrels. You work quickly, sweat mixing with rain. Osric ties knots, you lift planks, someone else wedges in stones. It looks like a disaster, but Dunwald nods. In a real siege, it's speed and desperation that save you, not symmetry. You make a mental note. Always look at a castle's hasty repairs before deciding to live there. Quirky fact, some defenders used dead animals, yes, actual corpses, to hurl over walls at attackers. Disease was just as powerful as steel. You're grateful Dunwald didn't ask you to find a fake pig today. Final lesson, signal fires and coordination. You're led to the highest tower. From there, you can see fields stretching out for miles, villages, forest, and another tower on a far hill. You light a small fire under supervision. Osric waves a piece of cloth as a mock signal. A distant flash comes from the other tower. Dunwald mutters, "A message received." Message was, "We're doomed." Fair enough. Evening approaches. You're soaked again, smeared with mud, and your right hand has a blister the size of a pigeon egg. But you've learned more in a day than you ever wanted to know about defending yourself while also looking like a damp potato. Back in the great hall, you peel off wet layers and collapse onto a bench. Supper is leeks, onions, and bread toasted so hard it might qualify as armor plating. Osric grins. No one fell off the tower today. You nod. Or burned themselves. He raises his mug. Victory. You clink. Rain taps on the windows like a polite ghost. Later, before sleep, you dry your boots by the fire, rubbing your temples and imagining the sound of crossbow bolts clattering against stone. Your bed never looked so good. The straw mattress, the scratchy blanket, the small creaky cot. You'd swear it's luxury now. You fall asleep quickly, dreaming of high walls, stormy skies, and enemies who politely agree to siege you only when the weather clears. You wake to the smell of ash and the distinct sound of bells. Not the usual morning clamor, the slow, deep clang of the warning bell. You bolt upright. Osric is already half-dressed, eyes wide. "What now?" you ask, panic flickering beneath your skin. He shrugs, pulling on his boots. "Drill. Simulated raid. We're being tested." You groan. "Simulated. Of course." Still, you scramble into your armor, slinging your belt and scabbard around your waist, adjusting your helmet as you and the other squires are herded into the courtyard. The knight marshal stands atop a barrel, bellowing orders. His voice slices through the chill morning air. "Your job is to defend the villagers, escort them to the keep, secure the gates, establish perimeter patrols. This is not a game." He pauses. "Well, it is, but fail, and you'll muck the stables until next harvest." You stand in formation, shield slung across your back, sword at your side. Fake villagers, played by kitchen staff and younger pages in ragged cloaks, are already panicking near the outer gates. One is pretending to faint in the mud. Dramatically. You and Osric sprint toward them. "Milady, please stand," you urge the fainting washerwoman. She sighs, mutters, "No sense of theater," and gets up. You guide the group toward the castle gates, ushering them inside as archers on the walls shout imaginary positions. They're coming from the east. No, now the north. Wait, both. Your pulse spikes. You know it's just a drill, but still, your boots slip on wet stones, and the tension builds. One of the guards fakes an injury. You and Osric sling his arm over your shoulders and half drag him toward safety. "Good!" a knight shouts. "Now repel the attackers!" You grab a practice spear and rush to the wall, joining others behind the battlements. Below, painted wooden invaders have been wheeled into place, some with painted swords, others with strange expressions. One has a pig's head nailed to it. Artistic license. "Loose!" the archer captain shouts. Bows twang. You add to the noise with a dramatic yell, then duck as a flaming hay bale is rolled toward the gates. You and Osric scramble to smother it with a wet cloth. You cough, though it's mostly for effect. Quirky fact. Drills like these, when they happened, were sometimes treated as local festivals. Townsfolk would gather, cheer, and occasionally join in, though usually only the nobles got to fling boiling water. Historians still argue whether such simulations were common or just idealized in later texts. The truth probably depends on the lord's temperament, and whether he liked seeing his squires roll in mud. Next comes gate defense. You're stationed at the portcullis, told to delay breach with whatever's on hand. You brace a cart sideways, hammer a loose board into place, and shout at Osric to bring more rope. He trips. The rope unspools like a fleeing eel. You both collapse into a pile of tools and very confused chickens. "Improvise!" the marshal shouts, laughing from the battlement. You lasso a bucket around the cart wheel. Osric throws a broom across the threshold. The gate holds, mostly. Another squire dumps water from the parapet. Someone else throws onions. You're all sweating, panting, grinning. After the defenders win, the marshal calls a halt. You gather in the yard, soaked and bruised, but strangely energized. "That," he says, "was decent." He even claps. Once. You beam. That afternoon, you're allowed a rare moment of reflection. No drills, no lessons, just the steady hum of castle life continuing around you. Blacksmiths hammering, kitchen maids chattering, pigeons flapping in confused circles. You sit near the well with Osric, chewing dried pears and watching the sky turn gold. I think we're becoming knights, he says slowly. You nod. One onion at a time. He snorts. I mean it. We've survived horse drills, swords, siege preparation, even court manners. Barely. You lean back, eyes closed, muscles aching but warm. A breeze stirs your hair. Somewhere in the distance, a lute plays a soft, meandering tune. You remember how this all started. Arriving at the keep, uncertain, clumsy, convinced you'd never last a week. And now, after months of sweat and bruises and the occasional wild falcon dive, you still don't feel ready. But you don't feel lost anymore either. Just then, the chaplain walks past, humming. He stops. You've both grown, he says, apropos of nothing. Knighthood isn't about valor. It's about perseverance. You sit in silence a long moment after he leaves. Evening descends gently. The castle glows with torchlight. Supper is warm and filling. Barley stew, fresh bread, and a slice of something sweet that might actually contain fruit. You eat slowly. No one spills. No one belches. Lady Marjolaine nods from across the room. Later, in your chamber, Osric lays back, arms folded behind his head. Do you think we'll be chosen? You know what he means. Soon, each squire will be selected, knighted, or returned to their family estates. The path ahead looms. It's thrilling and terrifying. Maybe, you say. We've done all we could. He's silent a long time. Hey, he says, voice sleepy. If you get picked and I don't forget me. You roll onto your side. We'll both be chosen. A pause. Still, don't forget me. You whisper, never. Outside, an owl calls. The wind brushes the shutters like a soft lullaby. You close your eyes. The castle stands firm around you. You've defended it, lived in it, trained within its stony ribs. And now, the final test awaits. But not tonight. Tonight, you rest. Morning is strangely quiet. No clanging bells, no barked orders, no smell of overboiled oats drifting down the corridor. Just sunlight warming the stone and the soft sound of Osric's breath as he lies still in his cot. You sit up slowly. Your body expects pain, bruises, cramps, stiffness. But there's something else today. A nervous energy. A hush before a storm. Because today is selection day. The squires gather in the great hall, freshly washed, hair combed, tunics mostly straight. The knight marshal stands near the high table, flanked by visiting nobles and elder knights. They look serious. Some even have scrolls. You're not sure if that's a good sign. No one speaks. Then the names begin. One by one, squires are called forward. Some are knighted on the spot, swords tapped to shoulders, oaths sworn with trembling voices. Others are praised but told to continue training. A few are dismissed, kindly but firmly. Your name hasn't been called. Yet. Osric is called. You squeeze his hand as he passes. He walks tall, shoulders squared, boots steady. The marshal speaks, and you hear the words, bravery, loyalty, heart. Osric kneels. He's knighted. Your chest swells. You want to shout, but you stay silent. Then, your name. Your legs shake. Your stomach does a slow somersault. You step forward, trying to look more confident than you feel. Your feet feel very far away. The night marshal's voice is calm. You have endured hardship, shown cleverness in chaos, and fought with both hands and heart. He draws his sword. You kneel. The blade rests on one shoulder, then the other. Rise, knight. You stand, not taller, not stronger, but suddenly steadier. Osric is there, beaming, already pulling you into a half-hug. The great hall cheers. Bread is thrown. Someone's lute breaks a string trying to strike a victory chord. That afternoon, the feast begins. Roasted birds, buttered roots, jugs of sweet ale, cheese with real flavor. There's laughter, music, spilled wine. You and Osric sit side by side at the knight's table now, offered meats instead of mock injuries. For dessert, candied plums and honeyed nuts. You eat slowly, savoring everything. Every bite, every laugh, every clink of a cup feels more vivid than anything you've ever known. Later, as the torches burn low and the stars return, you walk the ramparts with Osric. No more scrubbing pans, he says. No more surprise horse kicks, you add. You both laugh. A moment of silence passes, but it isn't awkward. It's full. You watch the moonlight on the stones, the distant flicker of village fires, the curl of mist over the fields. I was scared, Osric says softly. Today, that I'd fail. You nod. Me too. He grins. We didn't. You sit a while longer, 2 nights of the realm, wrapped in night air and memories of 1,000 trials. The wind carries a whisper of spring blossoms mixed with the earthy scent of the courtyard. Eventually, you return to your chamber. Your armor stands neatly at the foot of your cot. Your training tunic is folded. Your old wooden practice sword leans in the corner, scarred, splintered, and somehow dear. You lie down. You stare at the ceiling, and for the first time, you don't wonder if you belong. You do. Now, your real journey begins. The torches dim one by one, and the castle falls into hush. In the distance, a barn owl calls once, then drifts off into silence. You lie still beneath your blanket, the night warm with the soft scent of old wood and faded straw. The stone walls no longer loom. They cradle, familiar, comforting. Outside, the wind has quieted. The rain from earlier in the week has dried, leaving only the gentle creak of the wooden beams overhead. Each sound is slow, predictable, lulling, as if the castle itself breathes with you, slow and deep. The aches in your limbs feel distant now, faint reminders of hard-won strength. Every bruise, every blister, every fall from the saddle. They've settled into your story like soft echoes. Nothing hurts anymore. Not really. You feel the weight of your new title, not like a burden, but like a warm cloak around your shoulders. You've earned this rest. No drills tomorrow. No alarm bells. No cold stew. Just this moment. Just the quiet. Even the ghosts of your mistakes have curled up and fallen asleep. So breathe. Let the flicker of the last torch dance behind your eyelids. Let the wind whisper lullabies you don't need to understand. You're home. You're safe. You made it. Sleep, brave knight. Sleep.